Welcome to Unshakable Belief, the podcast where we investigate the stories, beliefs, and survival strategies that shape the way we think, feel, lead, and live so we can reconnect with who we were truly created to be. I'm Monica Azoulay, speaker, author, behavior and identity investigator, and the creator of the Reset methodology. If you've ever caught yourself wondering, why do I keep doing this? Why is this so hard to change? Or how did I become this version of myself? You're in the right place because around here, we don't judge behavior, we investigate it because behavior leaves clues. Let's get started. A few weeks ago, I was standing backstage at the Unstoppable Success Summit, getting ready to walk onto the stage. A friend actually snapped a picture of me just before I was getting ready to be introduced. In the photo, I'm completely focused, head down, reading my manuscript, trying to memorize my next few lines. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no way these words are going to come out of my mouth. I had spent weeks preparing that keynote. I had written every word, I had practiced it. I knew my stories, I knew my transitions. I had timed the presentation so I knew exactly where I wanted to pause, exactly where I wanted to laugh, and exactly how I wanted it to begin and end. On paper, I was ready. But standing backstage, it just didn't feel right. So I stepped out into the hallway just off the stage. A dear friend came with me and she simply prayed over me. Nothing dramatic happened. There wasn't a lightning bolt. There wasn't some overwhelming emotional moment. There was just peace, the kind of peace that quiets the noise. When she finished praying, she looked at me and she asked, "What are you going to do?" Without even thinking about it, I said, "I'm scrapping the script. I'm just going to tell my story." And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Now, don't misunderstand me. I was still terrified. Honestly, I'm nervous every time I walk onto a stage, and I think that's healthy. It reminds me that what I'm about to do matters. But something had changed. Instead of trusting the script, I chose to trust the story. Instead of trying to deliver every sentence exactly the way I had written it, I simply spoke from my heart. I surrendered the performance and I focused on serving the people sitting in front of me. Looking back now, I realized that moment wasn't really about public speaking. It was about perfectionism because perfectionism wanted me to believe the message would only matter if I delivered it perfectly. But that day taught me something I'll never forget. People weren't connecting with my perfectly written words. They were connecting with my authenticity. And I wonder how many of us have spent our lives believing that perfection is what makes us valuable, when what people are really longing for is something real. That's what I want us to explore today, because I don't think perfection is your problem. I think it's trying to solve one. Welcome to Unshakable Belief. I'm Monica Azoulay, and this is a place where we investigate the behaviors, patterns, and beliefs, stories that shape the way we live. Not so we can judge ourselves, not so we can collect another list of things we need to do, but so we can understand how we became who we needed to become, reconnect with our higher power, or God for me, created us to be, but so we can understand how we became who we needed to become. We can reconnect with our higher power, or God for me, who created us to be, but so we can understand how we became who we needed to become, and intentionally choose what comes next. Today, we're beginning a 4-part series on perfectionism. Over the next 4 episodes, we're going to look at what perfectionism is, what it is protecting, what it has cost us, and how we begin moving from performance into peace. But before we can do any of that, we have to challenge one of the most common ways we talk about perfectionism. We often say, I'm a perfectionist. We say it almost like it's a personality type. Sometimes we say it with frustration, sometimes with pride. Sometimes we say it as an explanation for why we are exhausted, why we procrastinate, why we struggle to finish, why we're so hard on ourselves, or why we can't let anyone else help us. But the language matters. When I say I'm a perfectionist, I'm not simply describing something I do. I'm describing who I believe I am. I'm turning a behavior into an identity. And once behavior becomes an identity, it starts to feel permanent. It feels like something you have to manage forever. It feels like something built into your personality that can't really change. But what if perfectionism is not who you are? What if it's something you learned to do? What if perfectionism isn't the problem itself? What if perfectionism is the evidence? Around here, we say that behavior leaves clues. Behavior is not random. Behavior tells a story. It points toward what we believe. It points towards what we fear. It points towards what we learned about safety, belonging, worth, love, and acceptance. It points toward the strategy. It points toward the strategies that helped us navigate experiences we didn't yet have the language, support, power, or capacity to understand. So when perfectionism appears, I don't want us to immediately attack it. I want us to become curious about it. Because perfectionism may not be the thing that's wrong with you. It may be the thing that once tried to protect you. That's a different conversation. Most people describe perfectionism as wanting everything to be right. But when we look beneath the surface, perfectionism is rarely just about quality. It's often about what we believe will happen if the quality isn't good enough. If I make a mistake, will I be criticized? If I submit this and it's rejected, will it mean I'm not capable? If I speak and someone misunderstands me, will I lose control of the story? If I show up before I feel fully ready, will people see that I do not know everything? If my body is visible before it looks the way I think it should, will I be judged? If I can't hold everything together, will everything fall apart? Those questions reveal that perfectionism is not simply the pursuit of an excellent outcome. It's often the pursuit of safety through flawless performance. And that distinction matters. Excellence is value driven. Perfectionism is fear driven. Excellent. Excellence says, this matters to me, so I want to care for it well. Perfectionism says, this has to be flawless because I cannot tolerate what might happen if it's not. Excellence allows room for learning. Perfectionism treats learning as evidence that you should have known better. Excellence can receive feedback. Perfectionism often hears feedback as a verdict. Excellence knows that a mistake is information. Perfectionism believes a mistake says something about your worth, your intelligence, your capabilities, or your right to be here. Excellence can complete the work and release it. Perfectionism keeps moving the finish line. There's always one more revision, one more qualification, one more class, one more piece of research, one more conversation you need to have before you're allowed to begin. Excellence says, I will prepare responsibly. Perfectionism says, I must prepare so thoroughly that no one can find a reason to criticize me. Now, the actions may look similar from the outside. That's why perfectionism can be difficult to recognize. It can look like responsibility, it can look like discipline, it can look like high standards, it can look like being the person everyone can count on. It can even be rewarded. You may have built a successful career because you notice every detail. You may have become the person your family relies on because you anticipate every problem. You may receive praise for always being prepared, always being polished, always being capable, and always keeping everything under control. But only you know what it costs inside your body. Only you know whether your preparation is grounded in care or driven by dread. Only you know whether finishing brings satisfaction or whether your mind immediately searches for what is still wrong. Only you know whether you're choosing excellence or trying to earn safety. For me, perfectionism did not begin because I love details. It developed in environments where mistakes, difference, exposure, and other people's emotional reactions could carry consequences. I learned to monitor myself. I learned to pay attention to how other people might respond. I learned that keeping the peace mattered. And I learned that the image of the family could be more important than what was actually happening inside the family. I learned to adapt. I learned to be useful. I learned to anticipate. I learned that doing things the approved way could reduce conflict. And when those lessons are repeated enough, perfectionism begins to make sense. If being correct reduces criticism, then being correct feels safe. If being useful earns approval, then usefulness feels like belonging. If being quiet prevents conflict, then silence feels responsible. If presenting the right image protects the family, then hiding the truth can feel like love. If adapting yourself helps you stay connected to the people or the environment you depend on, then conformity can feel necessary. This is why curiosity matters. Without curiosity, we look at the adult behavior and say, why am I doing this to myself? But with curiosity, we ask, what did this behavior once help me survive? Not the same question. One creates shame, the other creates understanding. And understanding does not excuse the ways a pattern may be hurting you now. It simply allows you to work with the truth instead of fighting yourself. There was a time in my life when doing things my way didn't feel safe. After I got married, I became a mother very quickly. Within months, my life was unstable and my housing depended on living in someone else's home. That home had established ways of doing things. Even ordinary things like how food was prepared could become a reminder that my way was not the right way. When your stability depends on belonging in a particular environment, difference can start to feel dangerous. You begin asking, how do they want this done? And you stop asking, what do I think? You learn to watch, you learn to adjust, and you learn to get it right. Not because you're obsessed with perfection, but because you're trying to preserve a connection, reduce criticism, and remain safe in a situation where you don't feel fully free to be yourself. That's the connection between perfectionism and conformity. Perfectionism can become the price we pay for belonging. We become who we think other people need us to be. We speak the way we think they will approve of. We make choices that are easier to explain, and we present the version of ourselves that feels least likely to be rejected. One day we look at our lives and realize we've become highly skilled at performing a version of ourselves that doesn't feel like us anymore. We did not only hide the story, we hid ourselves. That's why the stage experience mattered so much to me. Putting the manuscript down was not simply a speaking choice, it was an act of self trust. It was evidence that I could prepare without making the script responsible for my safety. It was evidence that I could trust the work I had already done. It was evidence that my message did not become less valuable when the sentences weren't delivered exactly as written. It was evidence that connection didn't require perfection. In fact, the connection deepened when I stopped trying to perform the message flawlessly and allowed myself to be fully present. That experience did not teach me to stop preparing. It taught me that preparation and perfection are not the same thing. It taught me that a script can support me without controlling me. It taught me that excellence can create a foundation and self trust can carry me the rest of the way. This is important because when people begin recognizing perfectionism, they often swing to the opposite extreme. They worry that healing means lowering their standards, or that if they stop being hard on themselves, they'll become careless. They worry that without pressure, they may stop achieving, or that self compassion will make them lazy. I understand that fear. When pressure has fueled your performance for a long time, peace can feel unproductive. When anxiety has kept you prepared, letting go of anxiety can feel irresponsible. When self criticism has pushed you forward, grace can feel like giving yourself permission to quit. But I'm not asking you to stop caring. I'm asking you to examine what is driving the care. You can value quality without making quality responsible for your worth. You can prepare without believing preparation will protect you from every possible outcome. You can work diligently without using exhaustion as proof of your commitment. You can want to improve without treating your current version as an embarrassment. You can hold a vision without condemning yourself for not being there. And you can practice excellence without requiring flawlessness as the price of participation. That last one is important. Perfectionism often tells us that we can participate later, we can be visible later, we can speak later, we can publish later, we can apply later, we can wear the outfit later, we can go to the event later, we can start the business later, have the conversation later. We can allow ourselves to be seen after we have improved enough, healed enough, learned enough, lost enough weight, built enough confidence, gained enough credentials, or removed every possible reason someone might judge us. But then later keeps moving because perfection is not a destination you finally reach. It's a condition that fear keeps rewriting. The moment you satisfy one requirement, another appears. That's why perfectionism often creates avoidance. We imagine a perfectionist as someone who is always producing, but perfectionism can also look like delay. It can look like researching for months and never releasing your work. It can look like rewriting the email 10 times and never sending it. It can look like waiting for certainty before making a decision that certainty can't provide. It can look like calling procrastination preparation. It can look like saying you need more clarity when what you really need is the courage to be seen learning in public. It can look like refusing to begin because you can't guarantee that the result will prove that you're capable. I've seen this in my own work. There have been times when I wanted the message, the methodology, the book, the business, the program, or the plan to be completely finished before I shared it. Part of that was responsible development, but part of it was fear. What if nobody wanted it? What if people thought it was nonsense? What if someone criticized the language? What if I invested time, energy, and money and the work didn't succeed quickly? What if the people who doubted me were proven right? Those questions were not only about business strategy, they were connected to identity. They were asking the work to prove my calling. They were asking the response to the work to prove my legitimacy. They were asking one launch, one episode, one program, one application, or one opportunity to answer a question no external result can permanently answer. Am I enough? Am I credible? Do I belong here? Did I really hear God correctly? That is way too much weight to place on any piece of work. Your work can be meaningful without proving your worth. Your first version can be valuable without becoming your final version. Your calling can be real even when the response is slower than you hoped. Your idea can need refinement without being evidence that you were wrong to begin with. Your responsibility is faithful stewardship. Your responsibility is not controlling the reception. That is one of the places perfectionism and faith become deeply connected. Perfectionism wants guarantees. Faith rarely gives us guarantees about outcomes. Faith invites us into trust. It invites us to listen, use discernment, prepare, take the next faithful step without controlling what happens after the step is taken. But perfectionism can even turn surrender into another performance. We start believing that if we trust God correctly, we would never worry. If we had enough faith, we would never feel afraid. If we were truly surrendered, we would never try to control anything again. And now we're trying to be perfect at surrendering. We're grading our faith based on rather human emotion still appears. But surrender isn't the absence of fear. Surrender is what we practice when fear appears. Trust is not a flawless emotional state. It's the direction we return to again and again. You see, God's grace doesn't wait at the end of perfect performance. He meets us in the gap. Grace meets us while we are learning. Grace meets us while our nervous system is still trying to protect us with old strategies. Grace allows us to tell the truth about what is happening without turning the truth into condemnation. This is the heart of the work. We're not trying to shame perfectionism away. We're learning to recognize it. We're learning to separate the behavior from our identity. We're learning to hear the fear beneath the pressure. We're learning to ask whether the rules we are living by belong to the present or were they written in the past. We're learning to build safety through trust, discernment, support, and the ability to respond rather than trying to prevent every possible mistake. And I want to pause here because this does not mean every fear is irrational. Sometimes the stakes are real. Sometimes details matter. And sometimes a mistake can have consequences. Sometimes people are critical. Sometimes work is rejected. And sometimes a conversation does not go well. Sometimes the person you tell the truth to refuses to understand. Healing does not mean pretending none of that can happen. Healing means knowing that if it happens, you will still be there. You will still have worth. You will still be capable of responding. You will still be able to learn, repair, adjust, grieve, clarify, try again, or choose a different direction. Safety does not come from guaranteeing that nothing painful will ever happen. Safety grows when you trust your ability to remain connected to yourself, to God, and to the truth, even when the outcome is not what you wanted. That is why the goal is not to become a person who never makes mistakes. The goal is to become a person who no longer interprets every mistake as an identity verdict. A mistake can be information. A mistake can reveal a skill you need to build. It can show you where the process needs to change or help you discover what you actually want. A mistake can become evidence that you are participating in your life instead of hiding from it. But perfectionism does not experience mistakes as neutral information. Perfectionism experiences them as exposure. It says, oh no, now they will see this. They'll see that I'm not as capable as they thought. They'll see that I don't know enough, that I'm not qualified. They'll see that my life is not as together as it appears. They will have a reason to reject me. That is why being seen is such a major part of perfectionism. The deeper fear is not always imperfect work. The deeper fear is being seen while imperfect. It can show up in our bodies, it can show up in our homes, our relationships, our careers. It can show up in the stories we tell and the stories we hide. It can show up in the way we avoid photographs, opportunities, conversations, applications, stages, videos, dates, gatherings, or anything that makes us feel exposed before we believe we are ready. I had to practice allowing myself to be visible before everything felt finished, and visible in a body that has changed, visible with a chronic illness, visible with scars and limitations and parts of my story that I once believed needed to remain hidden, visible while building work that's still evolving, visible while learning and becoming. And every time I allow myself to participate without first achieving perfection, I create new evidence. Evidence that I can be seen and remain safe. Evidence that I can belong without performing. Evidence that my body is allowed to participate in life now. Evidence that my voice has value even when every sentence is not polished. Evidence that another person's interpretation doesn't determine the truth of my experience. And that I don't have to control every response in order to remain at peace. This is how patterns begin to change. Not because we lecture ourselves into stopping, not because we repeat a positive statement that we don't believe. Patterns change through new lived evidence. We take an action the old story said was unsafe. We survive the discomfort. We notice what actually happened. We allow the nervous system to learn that the present is not the past. Maybe you send the email without reading it 12 more times. Maybe you submit the application even though you don't meet every preferred qualification. Maybe you wear the outfit now. Maybe you publish the first version. Maybe you ask for help instead of redoing everyone's work yourself. Maybe you speak honestly without preparing a flawless argument that makes disagreement impossible. Maybe you stop explaining your truth after you have stated it clearly. Maybe you complete the task and allow it to be complete. Maybe you celebrate what you accomplished before your mind begins cataloging what is still missing. Maybe you choose one faithful, imperfect action. Not careless action, not reckless, aligned action. There's an important distinction between settling for something that is not true to your vision and refusing to move until everything is perfect. Discernment is not perfectionism. Sometimes you know something is almost right but not fully aligned. Sometimes waiting is wise. Sometimes more information is genuinely needed and the timing isn't right. Sometimes a decision needs more prayer, counsel, research, or preparation. The question is not simply, am I waiting? The question is, what is driving the wait? Am I honoring what I know to be true? Or am I trying to eliminate the possibility of discomfort? Am I preparing responsibly? Or am I trying to make criticism impossible? Am I refining the work because the message needs clarity? Or am I refusing to release it because I want the first version to prove everything about me? Am I holding out for alignment? Or am I hiding behind the language of readiness? This is where we learn to make decisions from what I call the still point, not from panic, not from fear, not from overthinking or emotional reactivity. The still point is the grounded place where you can listen beneath the urgency. It's where you can distinguish wisdom from protection. It's where you can ask, what is true here? Not what choice guarantees that nobody will be disappointed, not what choice makes me impossible to criticize, or what choice will prove that I'm good enough. What is true? What is mine to do? What is the next aligned step? It's a different way of living. Perfectionism organizes life around protection. Alignment organizes life around truth. Protection says, do not fail. Alignment says, be faithful. Protection says, do not be criticized. Alignment says, speak with integrity. Protection says, do not be misunderstood. Alignment says, tell the truth clearly and release the response. Protection says, do not be seen until you are finished. Alignment says, allow yourself to be present while you are becoming. Protection says, control the outcome. And alignment says, steward the process and trust God with what you cannot control. This doesn't mean that perfectionism disappears the moment you understand it. Awareness is the beginning, not the finish line. You may still feel the urge to over prepare. You may still revise the message one more time. And you may still want to delay the decision until certainty arrives. You may still feel uncomfortable when someone else does a task differently than you would. You may still struggle to rest when something remains incomplete. And you may still hear the old accusation that if you cannot do everything, you're failing. But now you can notice it. And noticing creates a pause. And in that pause, you have a choice. You can say, I notice I'm adding this repeatedly because I'm afraid people will judge me. You can say, I notice I want to delay submitting this because I can't guarantee the outcome. You can say, I notice I'm over preparing because being fully prepared makes me feel protected from criticism. You can say, I notice I'm trying to make this conversation perfect because I want to control how the other person receives it. You can say, I notice I'm treating one result as proof of whether I am called capable or credible. You can say, I notice I want to do everything correctly before I begin. I can choose one faithful, imperfect action instead. This kind of acknowledgement is not criticism. It's compassion with clarity. It's the moment an automatic strategy becomes conscious. And once it becomes conscious, it's no longer the only option available to you. This is why I do not want you to leave this episode saying, I need to stop being such a perfectionist. That simply gives perfectionism another assignment. Now you have to heal perfectly. Now you have to respond correctly every time. Now you have to prove that you're becoming less perfectionist. No, I want you to leave with curiosity. I want you to notice where pressure appears. I want you to notice what happens in your body when you might be evaluated, misunderstood, criticized, or seen before you feel ready. I want you to notice where preparation becomes compulsion. I want you to notice where excellence ends and fear takes over. Notice the stories attached to your mistakes. Notice that what you believe in imperfect outcome would mean about you. And then I want you to ask one question. What is this behavior trying to protect? Don't rush the answer. Let the question stay with you. Because next week, that is where we're going. We are going beneath the behavior. We're going to look at criticism, rejection, blame, uncertainty, visibility, instability, worthiness, control, and the nervous system's attempt to prevent pain before it happens. We're going to ask why perfectionism can feel so necessary, even when it is exhausting us. But today, I want to leave you with the first truth in this series. Perfectionism is not your identity. It's a strategy. It may have helped you navigate environments where mistakes felt dangerous, where belonging felt conditional, or where the image mattered, where conflict was unpredictable, or where you carried more responsibility than you should have had to carry, where doing everything correctly seemed like the best way to protect yourself and the people you loved. You don't have to hate the version of you who learned that strategy. You can honor how hard she worked to keep you safe. You can thank her for the ways she helped you survive. And you can begin teaching her that safety no longer requires flawlessness. You can prepare with excellence and still trust yourself. You can care deeply and still release the outcome. You can make a mistake and remain worthy. You can be misunderstood and remain grounded in the truth. and you can be visible before you feel finished. You can allow your work to evolve and extend yourself the same grace you so freely give to everyone else. You can stop asking perfection to do a job it was never capable of doing. Perfection can't guarantee belonging. Perfection can't control another person's opinion. It can't prevent every loss, disappointment, criticism, or painful outcome. It can't create the safety your nervous system is searching for, but self trust can grow. Discernment can grow. Support can grow. Your capacity to respond can grow. Your relationship with God can hold you in the uncertainty. And new evidence can teach you that you don't have to perform flawlessly in order to live fully. So this week, when you hear yourself say, I'm just a perfectionist, pause, try different language. Say, I notice perfectionism is showing up. That small change separates who you are from what you're experiencing. Then ask, what happened right before this? What are you afraid might happen? What are you trying to prevent? What are you asking this performance to prove? And what would one excellent, responsible, imperfect action look like? You don't have to solve the whole pattern this week. You only have to begin seeing it differently. Because when the lens changes, the questions change. When the questions change, shame begins to loosen. And when shame loosens, choice becomes possible. Perfection is not your problem, it's a clue. And the clue is inviting you toward a deeper truth. If this episode gave language to something you've been carrying, I would love for you to share it with someone who's exhausted from trying to get everything right. And if you're ready to begin investigating your own patterns with more curiosity and less judgment, the free reset. Next week, we will continue this series with the question at the center of the entire investigation. What is perfectionism protecting? Until then, remember this: behavior leaves clues, you are not broken, and you were made for more. If today's episode resonated with you, I want to invite you to take the next step. Understanding your patterns is powerful, but lasting transformation happens when you begin putting that understanding into practice. That's exactly why I created Return to Herself. Beginning October 5th, this live 4-week coaching experience is designed to help you move beyond simply recognizing your survival strategies and begin reconnecting with the woman you've always been beneath the pressure, perfectionism, and expectations. If you're ready to stop surviving and start living with greater clarity, confidence, and intention, I'd love to have you join us. You'll find all the details and registration information in the show notes. And if this episode encouraged you, challenged you, or made you see yourself in a new way, would you take just a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it? You never know how one conversation can change someone's life. Until next time, remember, behavior leaves clues, curiosity replaces shame, truth creates freedom, and you were made for more.